Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone, and welcome to our final edition of the World Vape Show webinar series. Today, I am delighted to introduce you to Alastair Graham, the founder and CEO of AgeChecked, who will be presenting a paper titled How Retailers Can Use Advanced Technology to be able to offer a seamless age verification system to protect their business from selling to minors. With global vaccination rollouts increasing on a daily basis and restrictions easing, we look forward to bringing the whole vape community together and once again hosting our events in person in the very near future. Before we start, just a bit of housekeeping. Before I hand over to Alastair, please ask any questions in the question box on your screen and we will ensure to leave time at the end for a Q&A session. I also encourage you to network with others on this webinar via the chat boxes. I will now hand over to you, Alastair.
Thank you very much. So firstly, welcome to everybody for this session. I believe we have a number of people from various parts of the world, so I have tailored this this discussion to make sure that we touch regulation and technology as it applies to retailers from around the world. So first, a little bit of an introduction who I am and who AgeChecked is. So my name is Alastair Graham. I'm the CEO of AgeChecked. Our organization provides remote verification, authentication and suitability checks to retailers in many different sectors, including the tobacco and vaping industries. Our organization was established in 2015. We're a founder member of the Age Verification Providers Association, and personally I sit on the steering committee of the British Standards Institute, which created the first standard online standard for age verification called PAS 1296. So the two things I wanted to discuss in this meeting, primarily we're talking about technologies, but I need to explain the context of why those technologies are required. So we're going to discuss the sort of current state of regulation and enforcement when it comes to age verification in the UK, the EU and the US. And then we'll have a look at the current state of AV technologies. So there's quite a lot happening in the AV world. Things are moving fairly quickly, so we'll just discuss what that looks like and how things are changing and changing for the better, I believe. So firstly, let's have a look at Europe. So the e-cigarettes in Europe are regulated at an EU level by the Tobacco Products Directive, and whether you're in the UK or as was when it first came in, or the EU now, a lot of the assessment of how age verification should be put on the website is contained within the regulation. However, member states themselves have a lot of say in terms of how that regulation is rolled out within their own country. So many states such as France, Belgium, Poland do not permit tobacco products online sale, and there are many countries in Europe that are relatively unregulated. So it's quite a varied environment across the whole of the EU. This does look to be changing. There's an EU project, the EU-wide project around age verification and parental consent that is underway, but there's nothing likely to come out of that for another couple of years. So I think for the next couple of years, it's going to be a fairly broad mix. So for those providers that are selling across the EU, they will need to use technologies that are able to adapt country by country rather than utilizing a single technology for the whole countries. So I think it's probably worthwhile just picking out one country, which is Germany, to give an example of how different things can be. That is probably the most highly regulated when it comes to tobacco, and as well as what we would call a sort of age verification, which is checking the details that you provided belong to an adult. There's also requirements to do ongoing authentication of that individual as they're coming back to you. So really quite, there are countries that are quite intensive in terms of their technical requirements and some with none. In the US, the FDA is very severe in terms of its regulation around the sale of cigarettes. There is a sort of ongoing discussion, ongoing cases in the Supreme Court as to how far those regulations, how far reaching those regulations are. But ultimately, a lot of the issues around the regulations having been set in the days before the internet or written for pre-internet days. So there are requirements to check photo ID of everybody over 27, which is very similar to the UK's Challenge 25. And in effect, the court cases are trying to match what is a offline requirement into the online world. So that story is going to run and run, but at the moment it's fairly strict, and getting a clear black and white of what's required is difficult, and therefore technology that covers you as much as possible is quite critical, because the fines and the restrictions from tobacco, the Tobacco Control Act, are quite severe. And lastly, I believe we have quite a lot of the audience from the UK. I'm going to pick out the UK in particular. Sorry, I've got a question here. Do you envisage there are standard age verification processes? I will come back to that one if I may. So in the UK, we're cover the regulations that we need to meet are the tobacco and related product regulations of 2016. There are severe fines, up to imprisonment if these are not followed, and there's definitely a momentum towards tighter enforcement for vapes and tobacco selling. It's within the regulation, there's specified how you would defend yourself if you've ever been accused of not following the regulation. And I think, so the actual words are, the supplier exercises all due diligence to avoid committing an offence. I'm going to take just a minute to explain what I think is a great answer to the regulation and the defence. In the UK, which is particular to one of the countries in Europe, is the trading standards concept of coordinated partnerships. So there are I think I know of two, there may be three age verification providers like ourselves that are working with trading standards in what's known as a coordinated partnership, which joins the trading standards organization, your local, the retailer themselves, and the age verification provider. And the benefit of joining a partnership is in effect, by following the partnership rules, you are meeting the due diligence requirements, and therefore you have your defence in law. So it's well worth looking out for when you're looking to choose an age verification provider, that they have a coordinated partnership scheme, because it can save a lot of discussion, a lot of a headache down the line. It's not the only way of doing it, but it's a very good scheme, and I can highly recommend it. Okay, so that's the context of sort of the regulations, where AV is required, where it's not required. So let's just have a look at the technologies that are that we have available in the market, and the good points, the bad points of them. So really, whatever technology that a online retailer needs to put in place, you kind of need to, you've got four things that you need to get over. You need to avoid as much as possible any disruption to the user journey. You need to avoid, obviously, any loss of earnings due to customers decide not going through the checks, legitimate customers not going through the checks. There's a requirement, obviously, for any technology onto a website, the integration time. So we try, any technology out there, the more it's avoiding the integration time, the better. And obviously there's cost to integration as well. So that generally correlates to the less time you're spending on something, the less it's going to cost. So I think it's worthwhile just describing how over the last, I'd say, 5 years, age verification technology has evolved. So about 5 years ago, we didn't retailers really didn't have much choice in terms of what was available. There were data providers, credit reference agencies, for example, that sat on a lot of data, that knew how old people on an electoral roll were or on a credit reference agency list was, and you were just pinging them details and asking the agencies to come back and say, what is the age that you have? It's sort of quite a binary decision. And they were relatively effective, in some countries better than others. In the UK, match rates are roughly around the 70s to 80s for that. France, not quite as good, so you'd be looking at lower, sort of in the 50s, 60s, for example. So different countries have slightly different accessibilities, but there was no choice. So that was, in effect, the best that could be done other than a manual check. Now, obviously, that required integration into websites, which was timely and costly. So the first developments, the first enhancements to that really were sort of plugins that were available for e-commerce platforms, which really, the likes of WordPress, WooCommerce, for example, Magento, where in effect the same questions to the data houses were being asked, but the plugins avoided the need for tech teams with retailers' tech teams to spend too much time in integrating with the credit reference agencies. And as of, I would say, probably about 2 years ago, there's been sort of a significant improvement in terms of what functionality is now available from age verification providers who specialize in the space of age verification and management of age verification within a retail environment. So what do I mean by that? Effectively, we're now moving to a place where there are age verification providers who provide a service that not only can check the status of an individual, whether they've been age verified or not, but manage that individual's journey through a status of not verified to verified. And that can be integrated with the e-commerce platform, informing the fulfillment managers as to what status a current order has. And what's more, they can chase up the customers who've not currently passed an age verification, remind them that they can go through another verification. In effect, what this is doing is it's automating the whole process around the age verification status of your customers. It can even deal with returns. It can, so perhaps you leave an order open for 7 days, and after 7 days, if a customer's not been able to age verify, it'll automate the return on that order. As I said, it will send out email reminders for customers. So if they've not passed the first time, it will chase them up. What's the advantage of that? Effectively, well, you don't want to lose any of your customers, especially not ones that have given you money. So that will increase the match rate when the customer is being reminded that, okay, you didn't pass with the information that you gave to the retailer, but if you go through this particular method, you can do so. And obviously it reduces a huge amount of time and cost for the retailer in terms of staff that previously used to have to manually process the sale. So as I say, there are a few age verification providers out there that are now running these age verification management systems. Also, in terms of, I guess, match rate, the important thing is how many customers can I get through your system? What we don't want anybody to do, a legitimate adult, is to go to a website, buy something, and then not be able to be verified as being over an adult. It's not just the cost of that shopping basket that can be lost, but that could be the lifetime value of that customer. And therefore, match rates are actually critical. And this is another part of the evolution over the last few years that age verification providers have been looking at. So in addition to the old-fashioned sort of inquiry to a database in terms of like the electoral roll database, providers are now adding what's known as federated logins. So a lot of organizations such as AgeChecked have millions of users already on databases that can log in using previously created credentials so that they can go straight through an age verification nice and quickly. As well as the background checks, the standard background checks, organizations such as ours are able to do secondary checks. So in effect, you can have, should somebody say give their work address rather than their home address and therefore fail the first check, a pop-up could be called on a retailer site to enable a customer to put in details with either through scanning or additional details with the right details, with the right home address, whatever is required really to encourage them in order to go through and hit the next match rate. And then lastly, I think we're starting to see biometric and AI coming into play, where and also face-to-face interactions for just to make sure that anybody that hasn't gone through all these particular checks are picked up and given the opportunity to be able to show their details online, in effect taking away what used to be the sort of manual failback that retailers used to have to deal with. That's now being taken up by a number of the providers. So just to summarize, in effect, what this has done over the last few years is really started to raise the sort of match rates that are available online. So we've gone from just basically just the sort of foreground check. These are sort of averaged sector averages. We've gone from a sort of foreground checks of 78% to very high match rates now, because all these extra methods have been adopted by providers. So that's really, I think, the update, what I wanted to say in terms of where the technology has changed. If there's anybody that is interested in regulatory updates, we have a sort of ongoing, it's a free service. We have an ongoing bulletin that's available through this email address, where anybody can register and ask for bulletins on any particular market geography that they're interested in, and we will follow, and one of our regulatory team will add you to the list of regulatory updates. So it's not you won't be bombarded with sales calls. It's literally a regulatory update. That's it from me. I'm going to pass back, and I'm ready for any questions.
So yeah, thanks very much for that, Alastair. That was great. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. I can see that there's a few questions in the chat box, so I'll start with, do you envisage there ever being a global standard age verification process?
No is the short answer. There's definitely movements towards getting closer, organizations getting closer to standardization. Europe is attempting to do something similar. The states will do something on their own. There's a reason behind there's no real standardization, is because countries generally have their own interpretation of what is required at what age, and therefore the flexibility, the requirement for flexibility, means that there's never going to be one global process. There will be. I'm actually part of the steering committee for that. There will be a international standard on age verification, so there will be a standard created, but each regulator is likely to use that standard and say, this is the level of verification I need in my country. So it'll get closer, but there won't be one way of doing it.
Okay, great. Are the age verification processes the same between cigarettes and e-cigarettes?
In essence, yes. I've not come across any example where a verification for tobacco products has required something different for vape. I know there's some nuances as to whether, say, the devices are actually required to be age verified in certain territories versus others, but the actual, when it comes to the requirement when it's designated as being an age verified product, it's the same.
These two kind of tie into the same question, I guess. Are there any GDPR issues around verifying a customer? And then also what happens with the customer's data?
Yes, there are GDPR issues because data is being transferred from one entity to another, and that needs to be dealt with very carefully. I can speak to how we do it at AgeChecked. As a platform, we do not retain customer data. So we don't create sort of secondary databases of our clients' customers. We do the age verification that is required, and then all data is removed from our systems. It's not the way that everybody does it, but I think it's the safest way, and that's the way that we've adopted.
Great. And finally, how long does the age verification take to process?
It's a fraction of a second if it's a background check, so the customer doesn't notice it at all. If the customer is asked, should the customer fail, they can go through a secondary check if the retailer requests it, and that just takes a few seconds as well.
Perfect. I think that's all we have time for now. Thanks once again, Alastair, for the presentation, and thank you all for joining. Please note that registration is now open for the World Vape Show in Dubai, taking place on the 19th to 21st of September. We look forward to welcoming the whole vape community along. But until then, take care and goodbye. Thanks again, Alastair.
Thank you.